If you care about where America is heading, not just the headlines, not just the political noise, but the deep structural shifts happening underneath the surface, you're in the right place. On this channel, I break down the American economy, finance, cities, infrastructure, and everyday life in a way that is deeply researched but actually understandable. I go through court rulings, budget reports, market data, trade law, corporate earnings calls, and then I translate it into real life. Into what it means for your paycheck, your rent, your grocery bill, your future. If you value that kind of work, I genuinely need your support. Subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and if this video gives you clarity, hit the like button. It helps this content reach more people who are trying to understand what's really happening. Tonight's topic is not small. Are we saying goodbye to paychecks as we know them? Is America about to eliminate income tax in 2026? And more importantly, if that happens, does it actually make you richer? Or is this the beginning of a quiet system that could make the average American poorer while feeling like tax relief? Some are calling it bold reform. Others are calling it a 100-year gamble. By the end of this video, you'll understand what was actually proposed during the February 24th, 2026 State of the Union, why the Supreme Court stepped in just days before, whether replacing income tax with tariffs is economically realistic, why markets panicked and then rotated into something called the halo trade, how this affects Walmart shoppers, Amazon buyers, and iPhone customers, why farmers and factory workers could both win and lose, the hidden danger to Social Security and federal stability, and the one long-term consequence almost nobody is talking about. Stay with me, especially toward the end, because the final section is where we connect all of this into what it means for your future cost of living over the next 10 years. This isn't theory. This is structural change, a historic break, the biggest shift since 1913. You have to go back to 1913 to get a sense of the scope of what was suggested on February 24th, 2026. The 16th Amendment, which gave the federal government the authority to collect income taxes, was ratified at that time. Income tax has been the main source of federal revenue for over a century. It was used to finance wars. It was used to build infrastructure. The larger federal tax system that it supports is essential to Social Security and Medicare. The entire revenue collected by the U.S. government in fiscal year 2025 was around $5.23 trillion. Over half, or over $2.66 trillion, comes from personal income taxes. Tariffs? Around 4%. Imagine taking that 51% pillar away now. That's what President Donald Trump said in his State of the Union address. In essence, he proclaimed America to be entering a golden age in that speech. The markets were doing well. The Dow surpassed 50,000. The S&P 500 is close to 7,000. Confidence was the message. The statement that rocked economic circles followed. America should go back to a tariff-funded system similar to that of the 19th century, in which other countries pay, rather than American workers. The pitch was simple. No more income tax taken from your paycheck. It sounds good. It feels fantastic. However, economic systems are never that simple. The Supreme Court shock, just 4 days earlier. The Supreme Court's decision in Learning Resources Incorporated v. Trump came 4 days prior to that speech. The court ruled that the president does not have unrestricted power to apply broad tariffs as a revenue instrument under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA. To put it simply, without Congress, the president cannot merely impose taxes on the entire world. About $175 billion in tariffs collected in 2025 may have been at risk due to that decision. The administration changed course rather than retreating. The Trade Act of 1974 Section 122 was used by the White House to declare a 15% worldwide import tax. However, most people miss this catch. Tariffs under Section 122 are only valid for 150 days. This implies that frequent emergency renewals would be necessary for this system, temporary actions turning into permanent ones. And uncertainty results from that. For companies, for marketplaces, for supply chains, for you. The math problem nobody can avoid. Let's take our time. If the annual revenue from individual income taxes is $2.6 trillion, and just a small portion of revenue is currently generated by tariffs, How can the gap be closed? According to economists, in order to completely replace income tax revenue, average tariff rates on all imports would need to be higher than 80%. Here's the conundrum, though. Imports collapse if levies increase that much. Businesses switch their sourcing. Trade declines. Additionally, tariff revenue decreases as trade declines. This is an example of the Laffer curve. When rates are raised too much, revenue decreases. Even aggressive tariff expansion, according to the Congressional Budget Office, would cost around $300 billion a year on average over the next 10 years. That is just 11% of the current receipts from individual income taxes. Therefore, the numbers don't naturally balance until federal spending on defense, healthcare, Social Security, and infrastructure is drastically reduced. This brings up the awkward question. Is the goal to completely replace income tax? Or changing the obvious tax burden to something less noticeable? The illusion of foreigners' pay. Tariffs are presented politically as burdens on other nations. From an economic perspective, they are import duties. Who purchases imports? American companies and American customers. Walmart pays the duty at the border when it imports electronics from China. After that, the expense is transferred down the chain. It eventually lands on you. Current tariff expansions could cost the typical American household almost $1,300 in 2026 alone, according to the Yale Budget Lab. Imagine tariff rates going up much more to take the place of income tax. Your paycheck might show more money. At the store, though, you might discreetly lose it. Furthermore, price hikes don't feel like taxes. They have the sensation of inflation. Thus, they are not apparent in politics. Walmart, Amazon, and the iPhone economy. Let's bring this to life. Walmart has already admitted to price rises in early 2026, especially for Chinese-sourced appliances and electronics. Prices have increased by more than 3% in several categories. Similar pressure is on Amazon, particularly in light of modifications to the de minimis exemption, which formerly permitted low-value imports to enter duty-free. Items that were once $15 may now cost $19 or $22. It isn't dramatic. However, it builds up. And there's Apple. The majority of the iPhone 17's assembly is still done in China and India. Import prices are directly raised by a 15% tariff. The iPhone 17 Pro debuted in Canada for about $1,599, which is roughly $150 more than earlier models of a similar design. High-end electronics may experience ongoing pricing pressure if tariffs increase. It might appear better on your paycheck. However, the cost of upgrading your laptop, phone, or household goods may increase significantly. Market reaction: the rise of the halo trade. The markets fell precipitously prior to the State of the Union. Within one session, the Dow dropped more than 800 points. However, an intriguing event then occurred. Investors switched places. We witnessed repositioning rather than fear. The halo trade, which stands for heavy assets, low obsolescence, attracted capital. Businesses connected to the physical infrastructure. Utilities, makers of food, industrial companies. Companies are less vulnerable to global supply chain vulnerability and AI disruption. For instance, when investors looked for steadiness in daily consumption, J.M. Smucker saw a sharp increase. Meanwhile, pressure was placed on tech behemoths like Amazon, Alphabet, and Nvidia. Markets didn't convey a sense of celebration. It was caution. Global retaliation has already begun. Tariffs don't exist in isolation. In response, China imposed 15% tariffs on coal and LNG from the United States. Rare earth elements, which are essential for defense and electronic systems, were subject to stricter export regulations. In order to get clarification, the European Union put a halt to some aspects of trade cooperation. Targeted counter-tariffs were applied by Canada and Mexico outside of the USMCA framework. The fact that American farmers are at risk is where this really hits home. Crop prices drop if agricultural exports to China drop once more. Values of land decrease. There is strain on rural economies. Trade battles seldom have clear winners. They create crossfire. No tax on tips and overtime, relief, or restructuring. The so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which would eliminate taxes on overtime and tips, is another important item on the 2026 agenda. This sounds like a comfort to service staff. However, incentives are important. Companies might reorganize pay to reflect tip-based earnings. Base pay may remain unchanged. Reliance may grow with time. Fiscally speaking, removing these taxes may result in an annual increase in the government deficit of almost $33 billion. Temporary respite. Long-term structural questions. Healthcare and the 100% drug tariff threat. Additionally, the administration has proposed 100% tariffs on a number of patented medications made abroad. Pharmaceutical businesses are urged to use the TrumpRx.gov platform, which offers discounts of up to 85%, in order to prevent that. Reduced costs sound good. However, pharmaceutical companies caution that tariffed supply chains and persistent pricing pressure may result in lower R&D spending. The cost of developing new drugs is high. The long-term consequences of slowing innovation might not be apparent right away, but they build up over time. The 10-year gamble, 2026 to 2036. This is where everyone watching should be concerned. If the United States adopts a revenue structure that depends on tariffs, the federal government becomes to depend on imports. Economic considerations influence foreign policy choices. If revenue volatility rises, Social Security funding may need to be restructured. The 16th Amendment is still in effect. The authority to levy income taxes is still constitutional. Legal disputes between the federal and state systems may arise if its usage is discontinued without repeal. Additionally, if supply chains break apart, the danger of inflation rises. This reform is not minor. The way the U.S. finances itself is being redesigned. So, will you be richer or poorer? That's the real question. Will eliminating income tax make the average American wealthier? Or will higher prices, trade instability, and hidden inflation offset the visible relief? The answer may depend on income bracket. High earners could benefit significantly from income tax removal. Heavy industry could benefit from protection. But middle-class consumers, especially those heavily dependent on imported goods, may feel steady cost pressure. The danger isn't collapse. The danger is stagnation, slow erosion of purchasing power, quiet structural inflation, and a system that feels like relief while functioning as redistribution. My final thoughts. The February 24th, 2026 State of the Union may be remembered as the beginning of a new fiscal era, or as a bold experiment, or as a historic gamble. Income tax disappearing from your paycheck would feel revolutionary. But revolutions in economic systems always come with consequences. From withholding forms to checkout counters, from April tax filings to everyday living costs. The next decade will determine whether this is strategic recalibration or a structural miscalculation. If you appreciate deep, grounded analysis of American economics, cities, and financial systems, subscribe, turn on notifications, and if this video helped you see the bigger picture, hit the like button. Because what's happening in 2026 isn't just tax reform. It's the rewriting of the American economic contract.